Hello everyone, it's Colin Elliott here, and first of all thank you for taking the time to watch this PowerPoint video and find out a little bit more about what's involved in the transfer process to post-primary school. Now normally I would have done this as part of a parent meeting, but obviously with all the restrictions at the moment I'm unable to do that. So I thought the best way to do it would be to discuss this with you, give you all the information, and if you have any questions at the end, please contact me on Class Dojo or feel free to ring the school and I'll try and answer any questions or queries that you might have. Now, over the next couple of days, your child will come home with this little booklet from the Department of Education, Advice for Parents of Children in Primary 6. And this goes into more detail about the whole process of transfer. And I think it's very good to look at alongside this PowerPoint presentation. So throughout this video, I want to look at different aspects of transfer. First of all, I'm going to look at the background to our current transfer system, what we think is going to happen in the 2021-2022 school year, academic selection and what's involved in that, how we will try to support your child throughout the whole process in Brownlee, and also what you need to consider whenever you're choosing a post-primary school. So what I want to do is give you a very quick pocket guide to the transfer procedure in Northern Ireland. Well, the old 11 Plus has been in operation since 1947, so we've had academic selection since then, and it's continued right through to this day, although the actual format of the tests obviously have changed in that time. In Lurgan, Portadown and Tandragee, they opted for a new plan called the Dixon Plan in 1969. It's been very successful in those areas, and that's where children transfer from primary school to a junior high school and then on to grammar school at the age of 14. Some of the children from Brownlee who perhaps live on the Moira side of Lisburn have opted for that plan and have attended Lurgan Junior High. Now in October 2006, our political parties came together and they formed the St Andrews Agreement. And part of that agreement was academic selection, and that was embedded in legislation. However, in 2007, Katrina Ryan from Sinn Féin was our education minister. She was very anti-academic selection, and she did away with the mechanism for selecting children, the old transfer test. It was ended in 2009. Well, although Katrina Ryan abolished the old transfer test, she was unable to change legislation for academic selection. Therefore, in 2009, groups like AQE and PPCNI formed their own academic selection tests, which are used by the grammar schools to this day. What I want to do now is just have a little look at the transfer procedure and how things might pan out throughout the rest of this year. At the moment, we haven't been given specific dates as to when different things will happen, but based on previous years, I can give you a rough timeline. So normally in May of the P6 year, you're able to register for either the AQE or the GL transfer test. And I've put the two websites there for your convenience. I'll be putting all this information onto the school's website as well. Then the transfer test would take place during November and possibly early December of 2021. And then prior to Christmas this year, the Education Authority will publish online all the information about the post-primary schools. And most importantly, the admissions criteria that the schools will use to assess your child and decide whether they're able to offer your child a place. Again, I've put the appropriate website there on the slide, and I'll also be putting this on the school's website. During the month of January, the post-primary schools normally have their open evenings. And if that happens this year, please take the opportunity to go and visit as many schools as possible. Ask questions, bring your child along, and just get a general feel for the schools. Some schools will probably still have their virtual tours online, and again, those are very helpful. Now, the application process, if it is the same as this year, will be during February 2022. Then the schools take your applications, they look at them, they apply their admissions criteria, and they select their pupils for next year. Now, that's quite a lengthy process, so it'll be the end of May 2022 before you'll find out which school your child has been accepted in. Now, all these dates are at the moment they're provisional dates, but hopefully it gives you a rough timeline as to when things might happen. I want to talk to you a little bit more about the grammar school entrance tests. Now, in Northern Ireland, there are two main entrance tests, the AQE and the PTC-NI test, also known as the GL test. Now, traditionally, the AQE test has been used in the controlled grammar schools to select pupils, and the GL test in the Catholic maintained schools. However, there are many grammar schools now that will accept both for selecting children. Now, there is no perfect system for selecting children, and certainly the AQE and GL tests are not in line with the Northern Ireland curriculum. Some of the providers may say that they are, but realistically they're not. In order to answer the question successfully, the children need to be at what's called a level 5 standard. Now, a level 5 standard would be where we would expect a very capable primary 7 child to be at the end of primary 7. But of course, in reality, the children are sitting these tests in the autumn term of their P7 year. So therefore, our primary curriculum is very much accelerated and skewed towards the tests, really from the final term in P5 and right throughout P6 and into P7. We have to have all our primary curriculum covered by the end of P6. And then in P7, we're revising that again to prepare the children for the tests and make sure that they're at the very best of their capabilities in the autumn term when the tests happen. Well, the AQE tests and the GL tests are based very much on English and Maths. But in order to complete them successfully and accurately, the children will need to be aware of examination strategies. And this is something that we try to teach the children so that they're able to pace themselves and have all their questions completed well within the hour so they have time to check over them. Now, the AQE test has been well established now over many years, and we have many resources that we can use whenever we're preparing the children. Again, I have listed some useful websites at the bottom of this page. The preparation work that we do for the transfer test is suitable for both the GL test and also the AQE test. Children need to know the same content, however the exam strategies are slightly different. The GL test is multiple choice, which is very straightforward. However, the AQE does require more preparation because it is more of the traditional question and answer type of paper. As I've said, the majority of the controlled grammar schools use the AQE test. The Catholic maintained schools tend to use GL, but a number of schools now are accepting both types of tests. Here you can see a list of some of the schools that our children would transfer to, both in Lisburn and also in Belfast. So this table is a rough guide for parents showing some information about our local grammar schools where the children would transfer to if they've done well in their AQE tests. It shows each school down the left-hand side, and it gives you an average of what the highest score they've accepted has been, the lowest AQE score, the total number of applications for each school, and also the number of children that they finally admitted. Now let me explain briefly what a standardized score is. These scores like 126, 106, what do they mean? Well, we do standardized tests in school each year, and it helps us to track the children as they move through the primary school. It shows their progress and any maybe little areas for development. A score of 100 shows that a child is working at their chronological age. If they score above 100, they're working above their chronological age. And if they're scoring below 100, then it shows that perhaps they need some help in a particular area of English or Maths. Now, in the AQE tests, the standard sample is taken from just those children who would be taking the test as opposed to all the children in Northern Ireland. So therefore, it is much more difficult to score 100. You've got to be achieving a higher standard or higher score in the tests. So a score of 126 is really exceptional. A score of 106 is excellent. But in reality, you would need far more than 106 to get into Friends School. You'd be looking at perhaps 112, and to get into Wallace, perhaps at least 108. So why is there a score here of 106? Well, quite possibly the child who scored 106 also had their score supplemented with exceptional circumstances. As I've said before, exceptional circumstances are when there has been a major trauma in the child's life. For instance, the death of a close relative, or perhaps a divorce in the family. But something has happened during the testing time that has impacted negatively on their scores. And the child and the school are able to show that that child would have scored much better had things been normal. And we have to show evidence of their normal standardized scores in school, and also we've got to show any practice test results that the child would have achieved. So this gives you an indication as to how well your child needs to be doing. As a percentage wise, to score somewhere in the region of 112 as a standardized score, we would expect your child to be scoring in the tests as a percentage roughly around the high 80s or early 90% on a practice test. I want to take a couple of moments just to look at the AQE entrance test, as this is the one that is favoured by the majority of the children in Brownlee Primary School. If you'd like your child to be enrolled for the AQE test or the GL test, the application process normally runs from May until early September. The cost for the AQE is approximately £50. Now, with the AQE, there are 3 tests, and with the GL, there are 2 tests, and these will occur in alternate weeks during November and December 2021. At the moment, we don't have the exact dates. The results of the best 2 tests for the AQE will be counted. The application process for post-primary schools, as I've said before, will take place during February 2022, and this is for everyone, not just those who have applied and set the transfer tests. I've included the website here on this slide, and I'll be including all this information on the transfer page of our school's website, and that's for your information and for your convenience. Now, the schools will then apply their criteria once the application process is closed, and then towards the end of May, you'll be informed as to which school your child has received a place. Now, if you have a child who has a statement of educational needs, special needs, they will apply separately for their post-primary school, and that is done through your annual review, and we will explain that process to you, and we will help you through that. Children of Army families who perhaps have just arrived in Northern Ireland, or any other family with special circumstances, say if there's been a major family upset during the AQE tests, you can apply for special circumstances by completing an SC22 form. Again, I can help you with that, and these will be available after the transfer test results have been published. The next thing I want to look at is how Brownlee Primary School will support your child throughout P6, P7 and the transfer process. Now, this is for both children who are not sitting the transfer test as well as those that are sitting it. First of all, what we do is we canvass parents to determine how many children are likely to sit the entrance tests, and we've already done that, and we have had a very good response this year. So we've already started our preparation for the AQE and GL tests. Now, if your child has opted not to do the tests, please do not think that they will be set to one side and will not be working. They will be continuing with the Northern Ireland curriculum as they normally would have done. And we feel very strongly about that they will be continuing their normal work. Now, for children who are sitting the tests, the content will continue to be accelerated so that we have all the primary 7 work covered pretty much by the end of P6. This is so that the children will then be ready for the tests by November 21. If you've opted for your child to sit the entrance tests for grammar school, you'll find that our preparation work is well underway. The children are doing additional tests each week, they're doing additional work, they'll have additional homework as well. And specific times during the week are set aside for Mrs. Duffy to work separately with those children who are doing the tests. The other children continue on with their normal classwork. Their work does not be hindered in any way, and they follow the Northern Ireland curriculum. Now, from time to time, you might also find that your child joins the other children if there is a particular area of English or Maths being reinforced that they maybe need a little bit of help with. All post-primary schools will use admissions criteria to select their pupils. Now, for grammar schools, obviously this is academic selection, and that's very much part of their admissions criteria. But all schools will use different forms of criteria. For some, it could be the catchment area, it could be distance from home to school, it could be the primary school that your child is transferring from, especially if that primary school has already had a history of supplying pupils to the post-primary school. For integrated schools, they may look at the religion of the family. So if you define as Protestant or Catholic or other, they will have certain quotas that they need to fill, and they will select children depending on that. Other schools may use a generated selection tool, a random selection tool based on letters and where your surname falls within that. This slide shows a list of non-selective post-primary schools in the Lisburn area where many of our children would transfer to. Deciding on the right post-primary school for your child is extremely important. We often tell parents that it is better for a child to be at the top of a non-selective secondary school as opposed to struggling with the work in a grammar school. So have a realistic view of your child's ability, and you can gauge this through end-of-year reports, your child's classwork, the scores they've achieved in their practice tests, and also parent-teacher interviews. And remember, if you have any questions at any stage or you need some advice, please contact your child's teacher. The last thing we would want would be for a child to struggle through the preparation work for the AQE test and then find that the score they get at the end of the day does not allow them to be considered for grammar school. This could leave your child very disappointed and perhaps even demotivated as they start their secondary school education. Now, later on in the year, towards December, there'll be more information published on the Education Authority's website relating to transfer. Again, I will advise you at that time, and if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to get in contact with me. Now, when you're considering the right school for your child, it's important to speak to parents of perhaps other children who attend that school. Virtual tours of the school and perhaps open nights are great, but at the same time, it's important to know what the school is like on a day-to-day basis, and you can find that out by speaking to parents of children who already attend. Remember, don't be afraid to ask questions at any point. Although the application process for post-primary schools is now online, parents find it really beneficial just to chat through their choices with us. It's an opportunity for the P7 teacher and myself to meet the parents and talk about the admissions criteria, and between us discuss which school is possibly best for your child. It's also an opportunity for the P7 teacher to discuss the progress that your child has made this year. We are very aware that the transition from primary to post-primary education can sometimes be a worry and a concern for children. We try to support them as far as we possibly can and encourage them and reassure them during this time. But for children who are maybe sitting the AQE or the GL test, they may get very worried about the tests, and it's very important as teachers and parents that we don't put them under any additional stress. Actually, we find that some of the children who are most stressed by the tests are children who generally throughout school have done very well and have been used to getting everything right. And suddenly they're finding additional challenge, they're finding questions that perhaps they're not able to answer, and perhaps they're getting them wrong, and they need to rethink and go back and correct work. And this is not something they're used to. So don't worry about that. We need to teach them that there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. They need to learn from their mistakes, and that's all part of the learning process. So it is important to keep the transfer test in perspective. The real goal is further down the road when we look at GCSEs and obtaining good GCSE results, so that you can have more choice when it comes to AS level or BTEC or A levels, and maybe a route towards third level education. Both my children took very different routes, but have ended up in good jobs. So it's important to keep the transfer test in perspective. Now, during this time, your child is going to need more reassurance if they're doing the test. And even if they're not, even if they're transferring to post-primary school, and there is that change between going from a small school like ourselves in Brownlee to a much larger school. Make sure you do lots of family things, lots of quality activities together. Allow your child to forget about the tests and forget about transferring and just be a child. And just another thing which some parents have done in the past, please don't bribe your children with money because that actually adds to the stress. Or don't say, look, we're all going to go to Disney World if you do well in your transfer test, because that puts them under so much pressure. Sometimes parents have asked me about additional transfer tuition outside of school and how beneficial it is. Well, there are a few things I'd like to say. First of all, we pace the children very carefully to ensure that they are ready for the transfer test in November. If they're tutored too much, there's a chance that they will peak perhaps in June, and we've seen that happen to children in the past. And then come November, the children are waning and they're not really ready for the transfer test. They've basically been overworked and they're burned out, and they haven't done as well. So that is something really to consider. Where a tutor can be used is perhaps if there's an area where your child is having difficulty, and you can liaise with the class teacher and find out any specific areas that perhaps you'd like a little bit of reinforcement with. Also find out a little bit about the tutor. Maybe ask other people who have used them, because there are some very good tutors out there, but there are also others who are not so good. So it's important to do your homework, so to speak, and find out a little bit about them before you start to use them. This slide has the unusual title of Where Am I? Well, what do I mean by that? Well, I want you to think about your child's context. Do they know where they live in the world? Do they know where Northern Ireland is in relation to the rest of the world? Do they know where Lisburn is in relation to towns and cities in Northern Ireland and perhaps throughout the United Kingdom? That is very, very important, because if your child is reading a story or a passage or watching something on television about, say, the United States of America, South Africa, India, that they know where they live in relation to those countries. It's also very important that your child has an historical timeline in their mind, that they can place various world events in order and know roughly when they happened. For instance, does your child know that it's been 52 years since men walked on the moon? It's been around 80 years since the Second World War. It's been 3,000 years since the Egyptians built the pyramids. Can they relate to how many people do they know that were still alive or were born during those specific events? Those things are really important. It's easy to become consumed with Netflix and Fortnite, but they don't always provide a proper geographical or historical context. But if your child is going to be reading books and going to be learning new topics in the months and years ahead, it is vital that they are able to put themselves in context and know when things happened and where they happened. Parents are often interested to know about what information relating to their child actually transfers from Brownlee to their child's post-primary school. Well, here are a few examples. First of all, the end of year pupil report. This is the progress report that the P7 teacher will write. It will be sent home to you at the end of June, and a copy will also go to the post-primary school. Secondly, any attendance or behaviour information, especially if there are any concerns in those areas. And finally, the pupil's record of achievement, and this contains any certificates or awards that the child may have achieved both in school and perhaps in clubs or societies or organisations outside of school. Well, thank you for taking the time to watch this PowerPoint video, and I hope you found it helpful. Please remember, if you have any queries or questions, just to contact either Mrs. Duffy or myself at any time. Thank you.